Hi there, I'm Justin from Workato, and today I'll be demoing how Workato can be used to connect Namely and Okta. So how Workato works is that we start with recipes. Recipes have two things, triggers and actions. So the trigger will basically listen for an event that happens, and in this case we define it to be a new employee profile in Namely. And we have a set of actions that we can perform after this trigger is activated. So for the purposes of this demo, we're going to be doing four things. Firstly, we'll be listening on for new employee profiles in Namely and creating the same associated user in Okta. So there's an additional step here called the lookup table, which I'll be explaining in just a bit. So give me a moment. So let's basically start with creating an employee. So for example, Chris Matt. We're going to set a start date of today and a company email, Chris Matt. So when I hit save, we'll be creating the new employee profile, Chris Matt. And what Workato will do is pick that up and create the user in Okta. So the recipe started. We found a job. Let's give it a moment to populate here at the table. There we go. And our Okta instance should reflect that. So let's just refresh. Chris Matt. There we go. So basically, this is how we create profiles in Namely to show up in Okta. And back to where I was regarding the lookup table, because these two instances use different naming conventions for the IDs. So in Workato, we have a way to do the mapping for them in what we call lookup tables. So in this way, there's no need for you to maintain any external lookup tables if you want to make references to the profiles. And we can also add custom fields like whether they're inactive or inactive, basically activity status. So in the second scenario, I want to update Chris Matt's email in Okta and see the same change in Namely. So we also have a recipe built for that. And in the same way, we're listening for new events in Okta, and we are basically going to update the associated employee profile in Namely. So let's see that in action. So I'm going to update its secondary email. What I'm going to see here would be an update of this person's personal email. Okay, fire it off. All right. There we go, personal email, Matt Chris. So something to note here is that with Workato, we're able to do mappings for you through the UI. So we're not only restricted to personal emails or secondary emails, we can do mappings for last name, prefixes, titles, as long as these fields, whether custom or standard, are available in the API. And of course, it can be made available. So the mapping happens here, basically. I have to stop this recipe first to show that to you. But basically, what you get to do is that you can choose certain fields that you want to map over from Okta. If, for example, I change the company email in Okta too, I'm also able to use this very simple, intuitive UI to do my mappings. No code required whatsoever. So in this case, it's a simple drag and drop of data pills to do mapping. First name, last name, and it's that simple. We also support more advanced use cases. If, for example, you need to capitalize or put your last name to all caps, if that's your company convention, you can do something what we call formula mode to do data manipulation. So it's pretty nifty. Formula mode is supported for all eligible fields here. Okay, so this is the recipe for updating a user in Namely from Okta. And of course, the sync goes bidirectional as well. We can update a user in Namely to have the same changes reflected in Okta. So I'd like to show that to you now. So for Chris Matt, one of the demo scenarios that we want to show you is also when we have promotions or job changes. So in this case, we're going to change his job title from tester to tester 23, right? And this is handled in this recipe over here. Basically, we're looking out for change in job titles, namely to update Okta employee titles. So I'm going to save that. So one of the things that came up during the call also is what's this poll pending? So basically, depending on the plan that you sign up on, the poll interval will vary from 5 minutes to 15 minutes. That's the standard. You're also able to do scheduling polls if you need, so that in essence, what we're doing here is that this is a real-time trigger with a little bit of a delay. But if you like, you can also do batch scheduling, meaning that maybe at 12 noon you want to have all new employees synced in. That's also possible with Workato. So anyway, we changed his job title to tester 23. So what I want to see here is tester 23. So let's check that out. There we go, tester 23. Okay. The last scenario, I think Tucker mentioned that is the most important, is the ability to deprovision profiles. And HR can just simply deactivate or make inactive this user's profile in Namely, and we will be able to see the change in Okta, as well as get an email sent to all relevant personnel, maybe the CEO, CTO, etc. So I'm going to save this. So as of now, Chris Matt is still activated here. And once this recipe runs, which I can fast forward it by pressing check now. There we go. Once that happens, I'll get an email saying that Chris Matt has been deactivated. And this is not a standard email. Okay, I'm just gonna hop on over to the email action here. You can basically customize the email in any way that you want. We're using data pills here so that it's really customizable. You can even customize a message here. Put my name there. So this is one of the actions that you can also add in. So it's not only an integration between Namely and Okta per se. You can also add in peripheral actions like sending emails, sending Slack messages, or if you have a work bot or Workato's bot, you can also send it to your Slack channel upon deprovisioning, or even send a text message using Twilio or SMS, native SMS support. So let's take a look here. There we go. Chris Matt has been deactivated. Excellent. So one of the last things rather, this is a monitor for actions, monitor actions for error, a block. And that basically allows us to take action when a certain error comes on. This is error handling. So, for example, we can do the same email sending using this action here if an error happens, and we can proceed to try out what's the issue. And this really ties in together with the issue of Namely having regular API changes, very badly documented changes as well on the API. We've also had that experience. But here at Workato, what we do is that we bridge the gap, between you and Namely. We have a product team that is really dedicated to ensuring that the APIs are always up, and guaranteeing that your downtime is minimized when there's such an API change. We have quite a few clients who are also using Namely, and therefore we support them with any integrations that they have with Namely. And also, furthermore, back to this error notification thing. If there are any API changes that produce an error, you as the user will also be on top of that, because there's an action with error monitoring here. So if any case, you can even send an email saying that there was an API error here, a possible API error here. And basically, you'll be on top of that. So those are the two ways of how we get up to sync with the Namely API changes, both on the product side and then the recipe side. So one last thing will be that with our Namely connector, you're able to customize HTTP actions yourself. So you can make a HTTP call to the REST endpoint if you need functionality that's not supported in the product yet. These, of course, are custom actions. You want to fine-tune the actions also fine. You can do it here using this action. Or in the SDK, which requires a fair bit of experience to tinker around with, but we have excellent documentation online that's available. If you really need to build it out, build out a custom connector for yourself. But typically, the use case really, the use case of most of our users is that we have out-of-the-box connectivity using the product connector. So you should be fine in that regard. So, well, that is all for me. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either Christopher or myself. We'll be happy to answer them for you. And thank you so much for watching this demo.